never thought I'd be exiled by my own family at the dinner table. But it happened, right there between the cranberry sauce and the mashed potatoes. Thanksgiving night. The smell of roasted turkey still hung heavy in the air, mixed with faint notes of cinnamon from Aunt Carol's pumpkin pie. I was sitting quietly, like I always did, carving mashed potatoes into tiny bites for my niece Ellie, when my sister Vanessa stood up and smiled that rehearsed, pageant-winning smile that always made my skin crawl. "I have something to say," she declared, loud enough to halt every fork in midair. At first, I thought it was another one of her attention-seeking performances. Maybe a pregnancy announcement. Maybe a backhanded toast. But what followed wasn't celebration, it was an ambush. "I think it's time we were all honest with each other," she continued, her tone sugary sweet and stiff like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror for hours. "Last week, we took a vote." "A vote?" I looked around, my gut tightening. My father cleared his throat. My mother clutched her wine glass a little tighter, her lips twitching like she was trying not to smirk. "And the result," Vanessa said, pausing dramatically before turning directly to me, "is unanimous." I didn't breathe. "Isla, we've decided, you're no longer a part of this family." There was a second of silence, like the whole room inhaled at once and forgot how to exhale. And then, applause. Real. Actual. Applause. Aunt Carol even whistled softly like she was watching a Broadway finale. Luke, my cousin, lifted his glass toward Vanessa in a mock toast, eyes gleaming with something too smug to be mistaken for shock. I turned to my mother. She burst out laughing, like it was the punchline to a long-running joke. "Finally," she said. "Someone said it." My father didn't meet my eyes. He just nodded solemnly, like a judge pronouncing a sentence. "Maybe this is for the best." I sat frozen. Not with sadness. Not even shock, really. Just fury. It didn't rush through me, it calcified. Cold and absolute. I felt the room tilt, not physically, but emotionally, like the ground had betrayed me too. Vanessa crossed her arms, triumphant. "You've always been the outsider, Isla. So cold, so distant, acting like you're above us." "Well, not anymore." I looked at her, slowly, like someone studying a strange painting. I pushed my chair back. The scrape of the legs against the hardwood echoed louder than any of their applause. No one told me to sit down. No one even blinked. "You actually planned this?" I asked, my voice so quiet it startled even me. She smiled wider. "Of course we did. They thought they'd embarrass me. Humiliated me. That I'd slink out quietly, maybe even cry in the car, maybe stop replying to texts until guilt crept in and I'd come crawling back. But I didn't crawl. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick manila folder, and placed it gently on the table. The sound it made was soft, almost delicate, but it cut through the room like a blade. Vanessa flinched. My mother squinted. Luke's laugh faltered. Even the turkey steam seemed to still. "What's that?" Vanessa snapped. I didn't answer. I just crossed my arms and tilted my head. "Go on," I said. "Take a look." She opened it, 1 page, 2 pages, 3, and her smile cracked. Like ice under weight. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her hands trembled. Then she shrieked, a piercing, sharp sound that made little Ellie burst into tears. Joel, her husband, snatched the folder, scanned it, and turned white. "Is this real?" I nodded. "Every number. Every message. Every lie." The room didn't just go silent. It went dead. The kind of silence that only happens after a bomb drops and everyone's still standing, unsure of what's been destroyed and what's left. Vanessa stood paralyzed, her perfect curls trembling. My father blinked at the table. My mother's lips parted in confusion. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I just stood there and let them choke on their own performance. The folder was full of screenshots. Transfers. Texts. Receipts. Voice memos. Timelines. The past 6 years of my life, documented with the precision of someone who learned long ago that silence wasn't safety, it was preparation. Joel turned to me, his voice a whisper. "You kept all this?" "I hoped I'd never need it," I said. "But I prepared. Because I knew one day you'd do something you couldn't undo." Vanessa was still standing, but her eyes darted around like she was drowning. She grabbed the folder back, flipping through pages like she might find a blank one to rewrite the narrative. But the ink was permanent. The truth, undeniable. I turned to my mother. "You laughed when they cut me off," I said. "You sat there." I turned to my father. "And said it was for the best." "You," I faced Luke. "Raised your glass?" My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was calm. Colder than they expected. Colder than they ever understood. But not heartless. Just done. Then I said it, the one thing none of them could fight back. I didn't ruin Thanksgiving, I said. You did. I just showed up with the receipts. I picked up my coat and turned to the door. No one stopped me. Not this time. Because they couldn't. Because for once, I wasn't the one being quiet. I wasn't the one bending. They were. And as I stepped outside into the Portland night, bitter, crisp, silent, I realized I wasn't walking away from family. I was walking away from a room full of strangers I used to love. And I didn't look back. I didn't plan to humiliate them. That was never the point. I planned for survival. For clarity. For the moment when pretending to be part of something I never truly belonged to would become unbearable, like breathing underwater. When I placed that folder on the table and Vanessa's perfectly polished fingers flipped the first page, I watched the exact moment her world cracked. Her face, once so smug, turned pale. Her fingers trembled. The smirk that had carried her through every fake compliment and rehearsed accusation vanished like steam in the cold air. Joel leaned over, brow furrowed, eyes scanning line after line. Then he picked up a page, looked at me with disbelief. This is a screenshot of a bank transfer from your account. To Vanessa? $2,800. I confirmed. A week after she told you you'd lost your job and needed time to regroup. Joel turned to her, confused. I didn't lose my job then. I know, I said. But she cried to me that you were too ashamed to tell anyone and that rent was due. So I wired it. No questions asked? Vanessa reached out, trying to snatch the paper back, but Joel held it tighter, then picked up another page. His lips moved silently as he read. 3 nights at the Grand Hill Hotel, he whispered. Charged to my card. Booked under Alyssa Green? My mother interjected then, her voice brittle. Isla, what are you trying to do? Embarrass your sister? I turned to her slowly. No. I'm just reminding everyone who's called me cold that while they were laughing, I was the one wiring emergency funds, covering medical bills, fixing messes no one else would admit to. She scoffed. You sound like a martyr. No, I replied evenly. I sound like someone who's finally tired. I bent down and pulled out another envelope, thinner but no less potent. These are for you, I said, sliding the papers toward my father. He didn't touch them. Itemized receipts. I continued. Every dollar I paid for your hospital stay after you slipped on the stairs last winter. The ambulance, the surgery, the aftercare. You never asked how it got covered. He glanced at them briefly. His jaw tightened. And these, I added, placing another slip in front of my mother, are from March 14th. You told me your credit card was compromised. I wired you $2,200 to avoid ruining your credit score. Then you checked in at a spa in Tahoe the next day. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she could spin the story. Don't tell me it was an emergency retreat. Don't say it was necessary for your mental health. That money was supposed to cover groceries. That's what you told me. I looked around the table. Faces were shifting, confused, embarrassed, defensive. You all call me emotionless. Cold. Distant, I said. But when the bills came, you knew exactly where to go. And I never said no, did I? Not once. Luke muttered. I didn't know it was this serious. I turned to him, expression flat. You clapped when they kicked me out. He fell silent. I took out my phone and tapped a button. A voice echoed through the dining room, sharp, clear, undeniable. She acts so righteous. Cut the money and she'll fall apart. No one loves her. No one misses her. Vanessa's voice. From a group message she accidentally recorded and sent to Laura, our cousin. It was meant to be a joke. A roast. But it hit differently now. Then came the laughter. My mother's laugh, light and mocking. I pressed stop and set the phone down. You were spying on us? Vanessa hissed. No, I replied. You sent it. Laura forwarded it. I kept it. Because I keep everything. Joel looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I turned back to the folder and flipped to the last section, the financial breakdown. Over the past 6 years, I have transferred or covered a total of $81,200. I said, my voice calm, precise. That includes $9,000 for Vanessa and Joel's failed nail salon business, $5,600 for Dad's car replacement, $3,200 for Mom's emergency credit incident, $11,400 for Ellie's medical bills when Joel forgot to pay insurance, $18,800 in miscellaneous Venmo requests, groceries, travel costs, and one-off urgent favors. Each line was backed by evidence, bank screenshots, email receipts, text confirmations. Joel rubbed his eyes. You kept all this? I had to, I answered. Because none of you ever remembered. But I did. Every time you smiled at me during dinner but laughed behind my back. Every time I wired money and got silence in return. I remembered. Vanessa stepped forward then, trembling. Why are you doing this? You want revenge? I shook my head. I want closure. She clenched her fists. You're scary, Isla. You hoard every receipt like a psychopath. I stepped closer, staring into her. No. I'm just someone who stopped pretending. Someone who got tired of being used. Joel picked up another page. You sent this to Laura? He asked Vanessa, voice shaking. She's basically a walking ATM. No kids, no husband, no purpose except proving she's not a failure. Vanessa looked down. I didn't mean it. You sent it, Joel said, voice barely above a whisper. And you never thought she'd see it. My mother jumped in again, her tone shrill now. This is inappropriate, Isla. It's Thanksgiving. I turned to her slowly. And what you did, laughing while your daughter got voted out, that was appropriate. She swallowed hard. We were under pressure. No, I replied. You were comfortable. Comfortable letting me carry the burden while pretending I didn't exist. My father still hadn't spoken. Not once. Not to defend me. Not even to deny the accusations. He just sat there, staring at the folder like it was written in another language. Joel finally stood, breathing hard, his face pale. Vanessa, he said. Who is Alyssa Green? Everyone looked up again. Vanessa's face crumbled. It's not what you think, she stammered. 3 nights. Champagne. Couples spa. Booked under your name using my card. Same week you told me you needed to visit your sister. He turned to me. How did you know? I pulled another printout from my coat pocket, a screenshot of an Instagram story. 2 women in matching white robes. Same hotel room. Same balcony view. I checked the iCloud backup. It was on the shared device. I didn't plan to use it. But then, they voted me out. Joel turned back to Vanessa, broken. You chose this. You betrayed me. And then you insulted the only person who ever tried to help. Vanessa looked at me, her voice trembling. You wanted to destroy us. No, I said. I just stopped letting you destroy me. The silence returned, the kind that didn't feel empty, but heavy. Full. Everyone knew there was no going back. The lines were drawn, not in anger but in truth. I stepped back, breathing slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone in that room an explanation. They had all made their choices long before that night. But now they had to live with them. They thought the folder was everything. That my retaliation stopped at receipts and screenshots. That exposing lies and betrayal would satisfy whatever bitterness they believed I harbored. But they underestimated me again, just like they always had. The room was still thick with silence. Joel had slumped into his chair, one hand pressed to his forehead, the other still clutching the last incriminating page. Vanessa stood like a statue, hollow-eyed, her breast shallow. My mother had withdrawn into her wine glass again, and my father hadn't moved at all. But I wasn't done. I brought something else, I said. I reached into my bag once more and pulled out a large cream-colored envelope, sealed and neatly labeled with nothing more than a small printed sticker that read, "The day has come." I walked over to the center of the table and placed it down gently. What's that? My mother asked, trying to sound composed but already unraveling. I looked at her, then scanned the faces around the table. These people who had shared my blood, my history, my milestones, but not my heart. This, I said calmly, is closure. The legal kind. Joel picked it up first, glancing at the envelope like it might burn him. He opened it carefully, sliding out a thick stack of documents, his brows furrowing deeper with every flip. He looked up, stunned. You already signed everything? I nodded. Every last piece. What is it? Vanessa asked sharply, stepping closer. I turned to her. It's the termination of every legal tie I have to this family. My mother froze. What are you saying? I've revoked power of attorney. Removed myself as emergency medical contact. Cancelled all co-signing agreements, authorizations, and any liabilities where my name was linked to yours, financial, medical, or otherwise. Her mouth opened in shock. You can't do that. You're our daughter. No, I said, eyes unwavering. You voted me out. Remember? You made that loud and clear. I'm just honoring your choice with the paperwork it deserves. My father finally stirred, blinking like he'd only just re-entered the room. You went too far. I turned to him. Did I? Or did I simply do what you were too passive to prevent? He didn't respond. Isla, my mother said, standing now. This is emotional. You'll regret this tomorrow. No, I said firmly. This isn't emotion. This is math. Precision. Peace. Joel was still reading, flipping to the last page. You even pulled out of the hospital contacts? Yes, I said. If any of you end up in the ER, they won't call me. Not anymore. You're just being cruel now. My mother whispered. I laughed, quietly. Cruel? For finally giving you exactly what you claimed to want. She looked like she'd been slapped. I've spent years being the silent one. The dependable one. The one who sent money without follow-ups. Who agreed to co-sign when no one else would. Who filled out forms, transferred balances, fielded emergency calls in the middle of the night. And you all loved it. Until I needed something other than silence. Then suddenly I was cold. Vanessa's voice broke through then, venomous and defensive. You think this makes you powerful? You're just afraid to love anyone. No, I said slowly. I'm just done loving people who weaponize it. I turned and slid the last remaining form across the table, this one addressed to my mother. I even contacted the mortgage company. You'll have to find a new guarantor for the house. I've officially rescinded all obligations. They'll be in touch. She staggered back like I'd hit her. You'd let your father lose the house? That house was built on me, I replied. Every emergency payment, every second chance. And still, you all sat here and clapped when I was erased. So yes. I'll let it burn if that's the only way to stay warm. Luke, who had been silently shrinking in his chair, finally spoke up. Isla, maybe this went too far. I tilted my head at him. You think this is far? You clapped when they exiled me. You laughed when Vanessa mocked me. You sat silent while I paid for your second shot at that accounting course you failed. He blinked hard. I didn't mean to hurt you. No, I cut in. You just didn't care enough not to. The words hung in the air. He didn't reply. Joel turned to me slowly, his voice low and hollow. You really planned for all of this? No, I said. But I prepared. Because deep down I knew. You don't survive being used for years without developing a fallback plan. He nodded, like he finally saw it, saw me, clearly for the first time. My mother tried a new tactic. Her voice softened, turned desperate. But you're still blood, Isla. That doesn't go away. Maybe not, I said. But blood doesn't mean loyalty. Or respect. Or safety. But we're family. No, I said sharply. We're related. That's different. I turned to my father. You once told me I worked like a machine. Do you remember that? He nodded slowly. You said I didn't feel things the way others do. That I didn't need support. But did you ever ask why? Why I stopped crying around you? Why I started documenting everything? Why I built walls so high that even I sometimes couldn't see over them? He looked down into his cold glass of water. Because I knew, I said. I knew no one was ever going to catch me when I fell. Silence again. Vanessa finally snapped, voice rising. You act like a victim, but you chose this. You chose to be alone. No, I said quietly. I chose to stop being used. She scoffed. You just like control. No, I repeated. I like peace. And this, I gestured to the documents, the shattered faces, the silence. This is the first time I've ever felt it in this house. Joel stood then. So from now on, you're just done? Yes, I said. On paper. And in my heart. Vanessa threw up her hands. You'll come crawling back. They always do. I stepped closer, so close she could see every contour of my face. You still think this is about revenge. But it's not. It's about boundaries. And for the first time, you're meeting mine. Joel looked at me again. What happens now? I shrugged gently. You figure out who you are without someone to clean up the mess. Without a fallback plan named Isla. I picked up my coat, slid it on slowly. This time, no one moved. No one blocked the doorway. No one shouted after me. The early winter air outside bit into my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. I crossed the lawn, my boots sinking slightly into the wet soil. Behind me, the house stood still, windows glowing with warm light, but inside cold as stone. I didn't look back. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove. No tears. No hesitation. Just a quiet, complete goodbye. 2 days after Thanksgiving, my phone began to buzz again. The first message came from my mother. Her contact photo was still a smiling selfie from 5 years ago, taken the day I covered her overdue car loan. I stared at the screen for a moment before opening it. You can walk away, but you'll always be my daughter. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We can work things out if you just open your heart. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done or clapped along with. Just another gentle nudge back into the cycle, the pattern I knew too well: exclusion, guilt, appeal, request. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I let it sit there like a piece of spoiled fruit on the counter, untouched, a reminder of what not to consume. That afternoon, an unknown number lit up my screen. I stared at it as it rang, thumb hovering, unsure if it was another family member trying a backdoor. Curiosity won. Is this Isla? The voice was unfamiliar, male, composed but slightly rushed. This is Ben. I'm Joel's attorney. I straightened in my seat. He asked me to inform you that if his divorce from Vanessa proceeds to court, you'll be the primary witness. The documents you left behind, he filed them this morning. I blinked. He filed already? Yes, Ben confirmed. Everything you left, the financial summaries, the screenshots, the voice recording, he submitted it all. I thanked him and ended the call. For a moment, I stood still in my living room, unable to move, feeling the echo of a decision ricocheting across someone else's life. A photo sat on my TV stand. It was of Ellie and me, from 3 years ago, our hands linked at the top of a hiking trail. Vanessa had been off at a weekend spa. I'd taken Ellie to the mountains, where she ran through leaves and giggled until her cheeks were flushed. I wondered now if that spa weekend had really been what she claimed. I brushed dust off the photo but left it where it was. Later that evening, Luke sent me a text. Isla. I didn't know things were that bad. I'm sorry for not speaking up. I was scared, but I know you were the only one who ever truly helped this family. I paused at the last line. Then I scrolled further. Our cousin just lost his job. Any chance you could help cover his rent for a few months? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I blocked the number. My heart didn't ache the way it used to. Just a dull exhaustion, the kind you feel after a long, sleepless night, finally accepting that dawn will come whether you're ready or not. Silence, once terrifying to me, had become a shield. Not just absence, protection. No more midnight emergencies wrapped in guilt. No more texts that started with, "Sorry to ask," and ended with a wire transfer. On the fourth day, Natalie, my other sister, sent me an email. The subject line was oddly formal. A hopeful note. Isla, regardless of what happened between us, I hope you remember that others are affected too. Joel left the house. Ellie keeps asking where he is. Mom cries all day. I'm not asking for anything. Just hoping you can reassure the family. They won't survive if you keep ignoring them. I almost clicked away. Then I saw the postscript. P.S. Mom's having issues with the mortgage. The bank requires a cosigner to avoid foreclosure. There it was. Even the softest words eventually arrived at the same door, my bank account. I didn't reply. Didn't even reread it. I closed the laptop and let the quiet wrap around me like a warm blanket. The only sound was the soft whir of the heater and the ticking clock on my bookshelf. On the fifth day, I received a voicemail. I recognized the voice instantly. Gravelly. Measured. My father. Isla, you've gone too far. Your mother can't sleep. Vanessa's in a panic. You should come back. Talk like an adult. Don't let a small thing turn you into a stranger. A small thing. Being voted out of the family like a contestant on a reality show. Mocked. Applauded. Betrayed. I didn't reply. I saved the voicemail, not because I needed it, but because I knew they'd one day forget what they said. I kept everything, just like they kept convincing themselves I was overreacting. The following week, I found a handwritten letter in my mailbox. No return address. But I recognized the looping script the moment I saw it. 3 pages. Blue ink. No smudges. The first page was apologies, long-winded, elaborate, desperate. My mother wrote that she never meant to hurt me. That Thanksgiving got out of hand. That the house felt cold without me. That she missed my pumpkin pie recipe. The second page shifted tone. Vanessa was struggling. Joel had filed. The bank had notified them about the apartment being seized. Ellie was confused. She misses Aunt Isla. She wrote. She doesn't understand why you disappeared. The third page, the real reason, was transactional. If you helped with the mortgage, just the remaining balance, we would transfer the title to your name. That way, you can feel secure your money isn't being wasted. We want to make things right. I folded the letter neatly. Then walked to the kitchen and dropped it into the trash. No hesitation. No hesitation. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that asked nothing and gave everything. She was gone. Quietly. Like smoke. The apartment I lived in now was small, nestled in a lakeside town about 3 hours from Portland. I didn't choose it for the view or the lake. I chose it because no one knew me here. No one expected anything from me except being who I was. I worked part-time now, as a financial advisor for a nonprofit that supported single women rebuilding their lives. Number 11 p.m. work emails. No client dinners. No pretending to be fine when I wasn't. Just real people, real numbers, and the quiet joy of finally doing something that didn't take a piece of me each time. I started therapy, not because I broke, but because I wanted to understand. Why I stayed so long. Why I didn't walk away sooner. My therapist, Dr. Allison, had soft eyes and a steady voice. "You built your entire identity on being useful," she said during one session. "And when that was taken for granted, your identity collapsed." She was right. I used to think that if I stopped giving, I stopped existing. Now I knew better. I went on morning jogs. I baked cinnamon bread from a recipe I'd bookmarked 6 years ago but never dared try. I lit candles not to cover anxiety, but because I liked the scent of sage and cedar. I read novels that had nothing to do with self-help or business or productivity. One Saturday afternoon, I found an old photo in a box I hadn't opened since the move. Me and Ellie, her cheeks sticky with ice cream, sitting on the hood of my car. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Not anymore. I placed the photo in the wooden box and locked it. A memory. Nothing more. Nothing less. Valentine's Day arrived with a knock on the door. A package. No sender. Inside was a single candle, the same scent I used to burn back at the old house, and a handwritten card. "I miss the smell of your room. Do you still use candles? I know you're mad at Mom and Grandma, but I still want your pancakes again. Ellie." Her handwriting was lopsided, childlike, full of hope. She didn't understand grown-up pain. She just missed me. Her letter was the only one that made me cry. But even that, even her, wasn't enough to pull me back into the storm. Because I knew how the pattern worked, they'd use her next. Use her as the emotional Trojan horse. The last thread. I picked up the candle, held it in my hands. Then placed it back in the box, added a short note, and mailed it back to the return address. "I still use candles. But I don't live in the dark anymore." The day I realized I was no longer angry was the same day I rearranged my bookshelf. It was a small thing. I had just finished sweeping the floor and making tea when I noticed how cluttered the middle shelf had become. Paperbacks stacked sideways, old notebooks wedged between fiction and finance books, a candle I hadn't lit in months sitting atop a stack like a makeshift paperweight. I started pulling everything down, dusting off the covers, and deciding what still felt like it belonged in my life. That's when I found the tin box. I tucked it behind a row of books like it didn't exist, but of course I always knew it was there. Inside were the letters, every card, every desperate plea, every scribbled apology wrapped in a request. My mother's shaky handwriting. Luke's hesitant texts printed from old backups. The envelope with Ellie's candle note, still tied with twine. I opened it, half expecting a surge of grief or rage. But it didn't come. Instead I felt nothing. Not emptiness. Just peace. Like watching a movie I had already memorized, line by line, scene by scene. I didn't burn the letters. I didn't tear them up or bury them or float them into the lake under a full moon. I simply put the lid back on the box and slid it into the back of the shelf, not to forget, but to free myself from needing to remember. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about permission, giving myself permission to live without needing to carry the weight of being the one who always remembered. The new apartment was modest but warm. Wooden beams across the ceiling, wide windows that welcomed the morning sun, and a kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and brewed coffee most days. No more rushing out the door at 7 a.m. to sit in boardrooms full of men who called me intimidating for pointing out what their spreadsheets missed. No more silent dinners eaten in front of cold blue light, while waiting for another last-minute request to land in my inbox. Now I worked part-time with a nonprofit that helped women regain financial independence after leaving abusive relationships or generational debt traps. It wasn't glamorous. There were no bonuses, no titles, no corner office. But it felt real. And it felt enough. Most mornings, I jogged around Cedar Lake, the air crisp, the breeze laced with pine. I passed the same elderly woman sitting on the same bench almost every day. She was always knitting, sometimes scarves, sometimes blankets, once a pair of mittens in a soft lavender yarn. "You always look like you're trying to outrun something," she said once, without looking up from her needles. I paused, breath caught in my chest, halfway between truth and denial. "I guess I used to," I finally said. "Now I think I'm just trying to breathe again." She smiled, didn't reply, just nodded and went back to her stitching. That became our routine. A glance. A nod. And the quiet agreement that some things didn't need to be explained. One afternoon, while waiting in line at the local bakery, I ran into Ava, an old friend from college I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. We'd lost touch after I started covering family emergencies like a part-time job. She was older now, a few smile lines, softer eyes. "I thought it was you," she said. "I saw your name in that article, the one about financial healing and setting boundaries." She had read an anonymous essay I'd written that had gone mildly viral in a niche mental health blog, a story about leaving behind family guilt and redefining freedom. I hadn't expected anyone I knew to find it, let alone recognize the writer beneath the pseudonym. "You're still kind," Ava said as we walked out of the bakery together. "But now it looks like you know who deserves that kindness." We ended up sitting in the sun outside a little cafe, laughing more than I thought I still could. She didn't ask for the full story, and I didn't offer it. We just picked up from wherever life had paused us last. That night, I came home and did something I hadn't done in years. I updated my emergency contact form. For so long, it had been filled out of obligation. My mother for medical. Vanessa as a secondary. My father as a fallback. But now, one by one, I deleted them. And I added Ava. Not because she owed me. Not because I expected anything. But because I knew, if the day ever came, she would show up. Not to take. Not to demand. Just to be there. Spring arrived slowly in the lakeside town. The frost melted from the sidewalks. The breeze softened. My apartment bloomed with color, yellow tulips in a mason jar, a thrifted painting of a foggy forest above my bed, and a rug the shade of dried honey that I bought on impulse but loved more each time I stepped on it barefoot. One Saturday, I received an email from a community mental health group. They'd read my essay. Would I be willing to speak at a seminar on boundaries and financial recovery? I stared at the screen, unsure. I'd never spoken publicly about the full extent of my story. It wasn't shame that held me back, it was the fear of reliving it. But the longer I sat with it, the more I realized I wasn't scared anymore. So I said yes. The seminar was held in the town library. No big stage. No spotlight. Just 30 chairs arranged in a half circle and a room full of women. Some were younger than me, some older. A few had babies balanced on their knees. Some scribbled notes. Others just sat and listened. I didn't read from a script. I just told the truth. I talked about being the dependable one. The one who said yes too easily. The one who kept receipts not to destroy people but to remember what they refused to acknowledge. I told them about the dinner. The vote. The applause. And the silence afterward. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. And when I finished, the room was silent for a moment before one woman raised her hand, tears lining her lashes. "I thought I was the only one," she said. "Thank you for saying it out loud." I stepped down, hugged her, and for the first time in a long time, I understood what it meant to give without being taken from. That night, I walked past the bakery where the owner now remembered my order without asking. I picked up a slice of cinnamon apple pie, walked home, lit a candle, and sat beside my window with no notifications buzzing in my pocket. No one demanding I fix them. No one telling me I was cold for not bending. No one pretending I was family when I had money and a stranger when I needed grace. The tin box with the letters remained on the shelf. Still there. Still closed. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I no longer needed to prove that it happened. The truth didn't require permission to exist. It just needed space to settle. And now, finally, it had it. Grief has a strange way of disguising itself. Sometimes it looks like nostalgia. Other times it comes dressed as guilt, wrapped in ribbons of what if. But eventually, if you're patient, it shows you its true face, longing for something that never really existed the way you thought it did. That's what I came to understand in the weeks after the seminar. I had imagined peace would feel like silence. Instead, it felt like clarity. A stillness not of emptiness but of knowing. And in that clarity, I began to see just how much of what I had lost had never actually been mine. I started receiving more letters. They came quietly, without warning, like soft knocks at the door I no longer opened. One was from Natalie again. She didn't use formal salutations this time. Just a flat sentence. "Ellie keeps crying. She doesn't understand why you won't respond." Then, as always, the request followed. "Mom's health is getting worse. The mortgage is still under review. If we can't find a co-signer, they'll take the house. You're the only one stable enough to help." There it was, the formula. Lead with sentiment. Close with leverage. I didn't reply. I didn't even finish reading the rest. By mid-January, a new envelope arrived. Different handwriting. Slanted, sharp, rushed. "My father. We're refinancing the house. Your mother tried negotiating, but the bank needs a co-signer. If you agree, you won't need to make payments. Just your signature. No matter what, you're still blood. Don't let anger lead to something irreversible." Anger. They always framed my boundaries as anger. My silence as punishment. My refusal as cruelty. But I wasn't angry. I was done. There's a difference. I placed his letter beside my mother's, neither torn nor answered. They sat like relics, not painful anymore, just dusty. On Valentine's Day, another package arrived. No name, no sender. Inside was a candle, the same brand and scent I used to burn back when I lived in the house with the blue shutters and the suffocating expectations. A note was taped to the side, written in a shaky, innocent scrawl. I miss the smell of your room. Do you still use candles? I know you're mad at Mom and Grandma, but I still want your pancakes again. Ellie. I stared at it for a long time. That handwriting broke something soft inside me. Because she didn't know. She didn't know how they used her. How her letters were sharpened and sent like arrows wrapped in sweetness. She just missed the woman who made her pancakes into bunny shapes and told her she could be anything. I sat for an hour, the candle unlit, the card untouched. I loved her. I hadn't said it aloud, but I did. And it would have been easier if I didn't. But even that love couldn't pull me back. Because I knew what came next, forgiveness then requests. Warmth then guilt. A hug that turned into a hook. I wrapped the candle back in its paper, placed it gently in a new box, and added a note. I still use candles. But I don't live in the dark anymore. Then I mailed it to the return address and left the mailbox without looking back. The next week, while watering my balcony plants, I received a call from another unknown number. I let it ring. I let them all ring now. Not because I was afraid of what I'd hear, but because I no longer owed them my listening. That afternoon, I took my usual walk around Cedar Lake. The sun hung low, soft, golden light skimming the water's edge. Children played by the hill. Their laughter floated across the breeze like music I didn't need to understand. On my usual bench sat the elderly woman, knitting again. This time, a scarf in deep forest green. I see you sitting here often, she said without looking up. I nodded. Yeah. It's peaceful. She smiled faintly. Looks like you're learning how to breathe again. I laughed quietly. Yeah. I used to think I was breathing. Turns out I was just holding it in for years. She didn't ask why. She didn't pry. Just nodded again, like the truth didn't need to be dissected to be honored. Then she said, keep that air. Don't let anyone steal it again. I walked home slowly, my chest full not of sadness but of something sturdier, something like ownership. A few days later, I was invited to another local event, this time, a roundtable discussion at the community center. The topic was family, boundaries, and becoming your own guardian. I almost said no. But I thought of the women who'd approached me after the last seminar. The quiet relief on their faces. The way they exhaled just a little deeper when they heard their experiences spoken out loud. So I accepted. There were only about 15 attendees. No microphones. Just folding chairs, a pot of coffee, and vulnerability. One woman shared how she drained her savings to cover her brother's legal troubles, only for him to disappear the moment he was out. Another spoke through tears about giving her mother $40,000 for a house down payment, only to be told later she wasn't really family, because she didn't have kids of her own. I listened. And when it was my turn, I didn't read from notes. I just told the truth. I spent a long time confusing love with obligation. And kindness with surrender. I said. I thought being the one who always showed up meant I was strong. But real strength is knowing when to stop showing up for people who only remember you when they're in need. Afterward, a young woman waited as everyone else filed out. She looked barely 20. Her eyes red-rimmed but clear. My mom said I was ungrateful when I stopped paying her credit card, she said. But she never said thank you when I started. I reached for her hand. That's not ungrateful. That's awake. She smiled, a small, fragile thing, but it stayed. That night, I walked past the lake again. The moonlight turned the water silver. My reflection rippled in the surface, and for once, I didn't flinch at the sight of myself. I no longer lived in the shadow of being the good daughter, the responsible one, the dependable fallback. I was simply me. Free. Not because I cut ties in anger, but because I stopped feeding connections built on appetite rather than care. They don't miss me. They miss what I gave. And that's the difference. It was a rainy Thursday when I realized I hadn't thought about them in days. Not with anger. Not even with longing. Just hadn't. I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot on the warm wooden floor, stirring lentil soup and humming along to an old Tracy Chapman song playing softly in the background. The rain tapped against the window like a metronome, gentle and steady. There was no noise but the soft simmer of the pot, no tension hiding in the corners of the room, no old text flashing on my screen asking for a little help, just this once. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel haunted. And that was when I knew I had let them go. Let go of the need to prove anything. Let go of the invisible performance I had spent years perfecting, being the one who never needed help, the one who never got angry, the one who could carry the weight of 6 people and still smile politely at the door. I didn't lose my family. I released them. Released them from the pedestal I'd put them on out of childhood fantasy. Released myself from the dream that if I just gave enough, loved hard enough, bent far enough, they'd meet me halfway. They never did. And now, they never had to. The phone still rang sometimes. From distant cousins I barely knew, old acquaintances from the city who heard the story secondhand and wanted the real tea. I never answered. I didn't owe them a version of events wrapped in neat explanations. The truth didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. And I had already lived it. After the final seminar I gave in early spring, a woman named Carla stopped me outside the community center. She looked older than me but wore the same tired expression I used to see in the mirror, the look of someone who has given away too much for too long. She held my hand for a moment and said, "You didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for all of us who got left behind by the people we were carrying." That night I cried. Not for them. Not even for myself. I cried for all the versions of me that kept hoping. The one who stayed at the dinner table, even when the chair felt cold. The one who kept receipts, not out of bitterness, but out of desperate hope that someone, someday, would say, "Thank you," and mean it. I cried for her. And then I folded that version of me away gently, like a sweater that no longer fit, and placed her on the shelf of my memory with gratitude. Because she kept me alive. But she didn't have to lead anymore. In the spring, I planted a small herb garden on my balcony. Basil, thyme, rosemary. Watching things grow, slowly, silently, became my favorite kind of prayer. No applause. No expectations. Just sunlight, soil, and time. Some evenings, I'd sit out there with a book, legs tucked beneath me, and sip tea while the sun melted into the lake. I didn't scroll. I didn't reply. I didn't wait for anything. Peace doesn't always arrive like a breakthrough. Sometimes it just settles in your bones when you're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. The town knew me now, not as the woman who was exiled by her family, or the sister who burned the bridge. Just Isla. The woman with the calm voice at the nonprofit. The one who always brought muffins to the Friday staff meetings. The one who remembered everyone's birthdays without needing reminders. That was enough. I even adopted a dog, a rescue mutt with a crooked ear and wise eyes. I named him Orion. He liked to curl at my feet while I worked and barked at the mailman like he was defending a kingdom. He never asked for anything but presents. And he gave everything back in loyalty. One morning in late April, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple white envelope and a drawing. Crayons on printer paper. It was Ellie's handwriting. A stick figure version of us, me with a ponytail, her with a flower crown, a stack of pancakes between us. Underneath, she had written, "I miss when everything felt easy." There was no request. No guilt. Just that single sentence. And I realized, maybe I wasn't the only one who had been trapped in a cycle she didn't understand. I kept the drawing. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't love her, but because I finally understood what love looked like without control. Sometimes love meant not going back. It meant being the lighthouse, not the rescue boat. And if one day she came to find me, not through letters written by someone else's manipulation, but through her own choosing, I'd be here. Not as a savior. Not as a crutch. But as a soft place to land. Until then, I lived. I read. I cooked. I laughed, more easily than I used to. I didn't jump when my phone rang. I didn't rehearse apologies in the shower. I didn't shrink in the presence of guilt masquerading as love. I went on a weekend trip with Ava to the coast. We walked barefoot on wet sand, collected sea glass, and talked about everything and nothing. I told her the whole story one night, in a rented cabin with chipped paint and the smell of salt water in the sheets. She listened. Really listened. And when I finished, she didn't say, "I would have done the same." She just said, "I'm glad you made it out." That was enough. I kept the box of letters still sealed, in the back of my bookshelf. Not because I planned to reopen it, but because healing didn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It just meant it didn't control me anymore. Sometimes I look in the mirror and hardly recognize the woman staring back. Not because I've changed, but because I finally look like myself. Not the daughter they wanted. Not the sister they applauded out of the room. Not the fixer. Not the forgiver. Just me. Whole. Unapologetic. And finally, free. If there's one lesson this story teaches, one truth that quietly anchors every moment Isla lived through, it's this: not all love is safe, and not all family is home. We grow up being told that family is everything. That blood ties are sacred, and unconditional love is owed simply because someone shares your last name or your childhood. But what happens when the people closest to you become the ones who hurt you the most? What happens when home becomes a place of emotional erosion instead of refuge? Isla's journey reveals a hard-earned truth that so many silently carry. Being born into a family doesn't guarantee kindness, respect, or emotional safety. Sometimes, it's not strangers who wound you, it's the people who say they love you the most, while treating your compassion like a currency to be spent. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring for yourself. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was endurance. Her tracking of numbers, her stack of receipts, her quiet withdrawal from the chaos, all of it was a form of self-preservation. Because when others gaslight you into believing your contributions don't count, your boundaries are cruelty, and your absence is betrayal, you begin to question your reality. Isla never demanded applause. She just wanted fairness. Gratitude. A seat at the table that wasn't conditional on how much she could offer. And when she was voted out, when they clapped at her departure like her pain was entertainment, she did something extraordinary. She didn't break down. She didn't scream. She stood up, pulled out the truth, and walked away. She didn't burn bridges, she simply stopped building them alone. That's another lesson this story teaches. You cannot heal in the same place you were broken, especially when those who broke you don't think they did anything wrong. Forgiveness, often romanticized, isn't always about reunion. Sometimes it's about release. Letting go of the need to be understood. Letting go of the dream that your love could fix someone else's cruelty. Letting go of the idea that endurance is the same as loyalty. True healing is not loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or dramatic closure. It comes quietly, in the form of mornings without dread, dinners where no one is draining you, nights where your phone stays silent, and you don't feel guilty for not checking it. It's a soft, growing peace. It's rearranging your bookshelf and realizing you haven't cried in weeks. It's walking past the candle that used to trigger memories and lighting it because now, it just smells nice. Another critical lesson Isla's story highlights is that boundaries are not punishments, they're declarations of worth. Saying no doesn't make you heartless. Choosing peace over chaos doesn't make you selfish. Refusing to finance someone's bad decisions doesn't make you cold. It makes you awake. In fact, there is deep compassion in boundaries. When you stop enabling toxic behavior, you're giving others the chance to face their consequences. And you're giving yourself the chance to finally breathe. This story also teaches us that you don't need to erase the past to move forward. Isla didn't burn the letters. She kept them, not to dwell in pain, but as a reminder that she lived through it. Healing doesn't require denial. It requires honesty. It requires you to look at the truth and say, yes, this happened. And I survived it. And I will not return to it. Isla's choice to move to a quiet town, start over, and help others wasn't a retreat. It was a return to herself. The self that didn't have to be on call for everyone else's crisis. The self that didn't flinch at affection or second-guess every silence. The self that could say no, without explanation. And then there's Ellie. Her presence in the story is perhaps the most tender lesson of all, that innocence often gets caught in the crossfire of dysfunction. That love can still exist in the wreckage. But even that love must be approached with care. Isla didn't push Ellie away out of spite. She drew a line to protect both of them. Because enabling toxicity, even for the sake of someone you love, only creates more harm. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to model what healthy distance looks like. To be a lighthouse, stable, visible, but unmoving. Guiding them from afar, not dragging them into your shore. And finally, Isla's story reminds us that freedom is not found in revenge or control. It's found in release. In the quiet decision to live differently. In the daily rituals of joy and solitude. In the acceptance that some people will never understand your absence, and that their misunderstanding doesn't require your correction. She didn't lose her family. She let them go. Because the people who called her cold were the ones who only remembered her warmth when they needed it. The people who clapped at her departure were the same ones who used her silence as a weapon against her. And in walking away, she didn't become less loving, she became more whole. So if you've ever been the one who gave too much, stayed too long, or kept every receipt hoping someone would notice, let Isla's story be your permission. To stop explaining. To stop proving. To start choosing you. Because peace isn't found in being everything to everyone. It's found in finally being enough for yourself.